The next step in conducting elections is identifying the voters and making the electoral roll, more commonly known as the voters list. Any person who has attained the age of 18 is the citizen of our country, has no severe criminal record against him, is mentally sound and sane, is eligible to cast his or her vote during the elections in our country. In our country, we have adopted the policy of universal adult franchisee, which states that every person which fulfills all these criteria, regardless of their caste or religion, will be eligible to cast his or her vote, and there will be no discrimination on these particular basis. No discrimination will be there in the name of religion, caste, gender, economic status, and every person will have the right to cast his vote. India was amongst the first countries to adopt this universal adult franchisee, that is to provide voting rights to every person in the country. Once a person fulfills all these criteria, the election commission in our country allots him or her a voter identification card, more commonly known as the election photo identification card. It is just like the ID cards that you receive in your schools or in your coachings. It contains a picture of the candidate, his name, father's name, date of birth, and his complete address. By showing this election photo identification card, any person is eligible to cast his vote. But the government is not yet able to provide this ID card to all the citizens of our country. That is why we find that the election photo identification card is not compulsory for casting your vote. For voting, the voters can also show other identification proofs like ration cards or driving license, which can ensure that they fulfill the criteria properly. The voters list is revised every 5 years so that the names of the persons who are dead or the names of the addition into the voter list can be revived every 5 years and can be rechecked to ensure that it remains up to date. Once the voters list is complete, now we come to the second step, which is the nomination of the candidates. Which candidates are eligible or can stand as a candidate in the elections. To be a candidate in the election, the person has to fulfill certain qualifications. The first is the person has to be more than 25 years of age. The person should not hold any criminal record. And the person should be mentally sane. Citizenship is a certainty, of course. The candidates can either fight the election on their own as an individual candidate, or they can be in support of any particular party. Usually the parties provide the candidates with a ticket, which is used in normal language, so that they can have one candidate from any particular constituency as their representative to fight in the elections. Every person who wishes to be a candidate in the election, to contest in the election, has to go through certain functions. The first is fulfilling of the nomination form. And giving some amount of money as a security deposit. With these two, recently a new system is added to this, that the candidate has to declare his liabilities and assets as told by the Supreme Court, that every candidate has to make a legal declaration giving full details about any previous criminal charges if he had, all the details of the assets and liabilities of the candidates, his particular educational qualification. That is, the candidate has to provide each and every data to the Supreme Court. He has to make it public. In this we see that we have mentioned that the candidate has to declare his educational qualification, but we did not mention this, that there is any minimum educational qualification required to fight in the election or to be a candidate in the election. This brings a question to our mind ki, don't we require an educated candidate to be our representative? Shouldn't there be some minimum educational qualification for the candidateship or to contest in the election? But we do not have. And the explanation of it is that, taking into consideration the actual or the fact condition of the country, the reality, around half of the population is not educated. And if we are going to put this barrier, this educational qualification, no matter how minimum it is, let's say we can keep it as the 5th standard, but still we'll find that most part of the population is not even that much of educated, so they'll be completely eliminated from the nomination or to be a contestant in the elections. So then, that we are eliminating the locals or the people who are actually aware of the problems of any particular area, then the representatives who will be elected in those areas will not know that much of the local problems or the local sufferings of the people. That is why educational qualification is not the criteria of being aware of the problems of any particular area. We can take the biggest example, that there was Rabri Devi who served as the chief minister of a particular state, and she did not possess any significant educational qualification, and still she was given such a significant post. So educational qualification is not the criteria to identify that the person is capable or not. If the person is competent enough to know the problems of any particular area and to fight for that problems, to have a say, to raise his voice against the problems, then that person is eligible enough to be a candidate in the elections. Once the constituencies are formed, the voter list is identified, the candidates have been given their nomination, then comes the duration of 15 days during which the election campaigning is held. It is a 2 weeks period between the candidate's final list declaration and the date of polling. During this period of election campaigning, the parties are allowed to promote their motives amongst the common people. During this period, the candidates contact their voters, political leaders, address election meetings and political parties, mobilize their supporters. They do all the mediums, they use all the mediums through which they can gain support from the public, which is going to help them to gain more votes. They go to the newspapers, they do television shows, they even declare it on radios, which are then again different mediums to reach the common folks. But it's not like the election campaigning happens only in this duration of 2 weeks. The political parties, they usually start their campaigning much before this 2 weeks period. It's just in this 2 weeks duration the election campaigning is at its peak. For campaigning they use slogans, they use pamphlets, they declare an election manifesto. An election manifesto is a booklet of promises that the political parties make to the people. It contains its previous achievements as well as the benefits they are going to provide to the people if they come in power. But throughout this election campaigning processes, it's not like all the political parties use only the fair means of promotion. Sometimes the political parties use unfair means, use malpractices for promoting their political motives. They can bribe the people or they can threaten the people. They can appeal to the people in the name of religion or caste or their brotherhood. They can appeal to the people in the name of their villages. They can use government resources. They can spend enormous amount of money in election campaigning. Now, to keep a control on all these unnecessary malpractices, to avoid all these unfair means, the Election Commission has regulated the whole election campaigning process with the medium of the Code of Conduct. In this mode of conduct, it is mentioned that the political parties cannot use any religious place for their election propaganda. They are not supposed to use any government properties, any government resources for their promotional purposes. Once the elections are announced, the members or the ministers of the existing government, they are not supposed to lay the foundation or to initiate any big program, to launch any big program. The expenditure is confined. The expenditure cannot exceed 25 lakhs in the Lok Sabha constituencies and 10 lakhs in assembly constituencies. Bribe or threatening is completely prohibited during the elections under this model code of conduct. If any candidate is caught not following these guidelines, then their election can be rejected by the court even after they have been declared elected. So, these guidelines have to be strictly followed by the candidates during the elections.